Good evening. Luckily, we had some rain at last, which is very fortunate down here in a very, very dry season in Australia. I want to discuss extreme racism within a certain class of people within Australia. And it's not on the right, like everyone's not in the right in One Nation or Fraser Anning and all those people. It's not that at all. It is within the left, it's within the elite, socialist elite that are in the left, are now proven beyond any shadow of doubt they're very, very seriously racist people. And we can prove this because these people are protesting against a coal mine being produced in Queensland in the Carmichael area. And this coal mine, and basically a bit of scrub, it's going then to supply coal to people in India who then can rise out of poverty because coal is the means that all people in the Western world have risen out of poverty and improved their lifestyles and reduced extended their life expectancy, etc. Now, this is just known facts. It's actually, and now the fact is that even doctors in Australia protesting about the very means of people in poor black countries, including Indians, of getting themselves out of poverty and stopping their children getting terrible illnesses and dying at an early age, and stopping the women, therefore relieving women of that terrible burden of seeing your children die from diseases and illnesses that have to do with poverty, whether that's water or whatever, because with energy, the mess energy that you can create from coal can create lots and lots of fresh water as well. It doesn't just, it gives you then chance to use technology to then create hydrology, and every village then can have nice fresh water if it's got the power supply, and therefore it can have fresh water, and therefore it can have hydronics food supply, so it always has food to keep its people fed. Now, the sad part about this climate change debacle and policies, the debate is held within people who either have no idea the meaning of it or are purposely developing a sort of irrational narrative that is contradictory in essence to what on face it seems to mean. What I mean by that is, and I'll go back again to it's easier to understand, when you have a bunch of doctors who've moved to this left thing, this whatever reason that caused them to do that, don't just think because they're doctors they're humanitarians. You have to understand that Nazis had lots and lots of doctors working for them, doing terrible experiments, genetic experiments and what have you, on the Jews and other people before that in hospitals and stuff. The Nazis were into using the skills of doctors to do genetic and other experiments on people they have captured. Now, I'm not saying these people are doing that, but I'm just showing that doctors, just because people are doctors, it doesn't mean they've got this wonderful humanity in their heart. It has there's the two things, there are wonderful doctors in the world who are deeply humane, and there are other doctors who are not. It's just the same like scientists. And not some are humane, some are not scientists. That's just way human nature. But the fact is, there are these inhumane doctors in Australia, and I say that purposely because they're there protesting. They're global activists. They're not local activists because they're global activists standing against people getting themselves out of poverty, while the same people are enriching themselves by embracing this ideology. So you can see it's a two-way thing. They can enrich out of creating and causing more poverty in the world or stopping people getting out of poverty. It's rewarding them financially by joining, and you reward them socially, and they get a status out of it because there's a sort of a status in this. I don't know what the status is, by the way. I can't work it out how it lifts your status up to be involved in stopping something that raises people out of poverty. The thing is, what people, though, they want to deny all of these people, want to deny a mathematical fact. And that is a very specific thing. But what China is doing, anyone can go there and find this out. Anyone can go from Australia or America and discover this for themselves. So it's not me making up. It's just something you can discover as a fact. And the Chinese are replacing the old coal-fired power stations, which were old technology, and they produce a lot of smog with the particulates. They're replacing with a high-pressure coal-fired system, which reduces the amount of smog and releases CO2 into the air. But the Chinese have worked out mathematically that to reduce the CO2 faster in an accelerated manner, you have to take cars off the road and replace them by electric vehicles. You cannot replace electric vehicles reliably from wind and solar, obviously, because solar doesn't shine at night, the sun doesn't shine at night, and the wind might not blow at night time, so you could end up with a whole car fleet stationary in the morning because you haven't been able to charge your cars up because there's been no wind blowing and certainly no sun shining at night. And this is a very, very simple fact even someone in primary school should be able to grasp. But apparently the whole of the political class of people can't grasp that very simple concept, that to reduce the CO2, which the majority is in motor vehicles, you have to have the means of empowering them and recharging them on a constant basis. And this alone identifies the fraud in all of this. And it says there's something else going on behind here, this ideological approach to something that's basically very questionable in its hypothesis, very questionable in the way it's been handled, and very questionable not just as a science of climate is changing, but the means, what does it mean in actual fact for a survival thing? Who's going to survive in this? Or is it a means of preventing people surviving through climate change by keeping them in abject poverty throughout whatever happens? Because the best way to survive any situation is to have the financial means or the economic means to get through any situation. But if you're not into that position and these catastrophes happen or climate things happen, you're in a worse position. And these elite, we're making all this money out of this, they'll be fine, they'll be safe, they'll be in their luxury dwellings, they'll be able to do whatever they like and escape to wherever they like in the world and live safely ever after, no matter what much damage they've done to the rest of people, saying we're saving your lives by stopping you getting out of poverty. Now, all these people say, well, these Indian people and all that can have solar panels and they can have wind generators. Well, there has to be a thing called currency exchange to afford that. The amount of wind generators you need, because it's unreliable compared with one coal-fired power station, is immeasurable. You can't measure how many wind generators you need to replace one coal-fired power station, because the wind may drop out at any time amongst all of it at once. It may drop out all of it. And then there's a distance problem, how much power you lose from the wind generators to your actual distribution points. And what do? You can't store the energy in enough batteries to feed everyone's whatever, all the things you need of machinery to get working, plus recharge your cars. So obviously one small coal-fired power station, and that's all it needs to be, can produce water. This is the important part. You have the power then to produce water, fresh water out of dirty water or out of the air or out of the sea, and that then can distribute water to people, that then gives them a reliable fresh water supply, stop killing their kids with bad water, and also gives them a constant water supply which can be made into using hydroponics, so therefore you can have a constant supply of food, which if it's vegetables, then you can use the dirt surface of that to create protein, which is in chickens or other animals, which then can be eaten with eggs and whatever. So you can see the whole thing about we're trying to save the planet. No, they're trying to destroy the means of people who are living in abject poverty, watching children die of health, watching the mothers, excuse me, having to suffer the agony of seeing their children, become ill or born into poverty and having to suffer, really, really struggle by people who've never struggled in their life for a meal or for a day's income or for the rent or for anything. They've never struggled at all. They've had no struggle in their life. They've very little. They're even struggling with their conscience over this. This is a remarkable thing. So for these people who to not One Nation and Clive Palmer or anyone else to say, oh, they're on the far right, no. Everything these people say, you must look at the opposite meaning, and you can analyse it down and show, just simply by simple rationalisation, the actual true meaning in what they're saying, just by having a look at the facts and just go and refer to what China's doing by means of, he wants to increase, it's got terrible pollution with motor vehicles, with the fossil fuels. It's got terrible pollution, no one denies that. And how do you replace that? How do you replace all that fossil fuel? You recharge it using something else. You have to have that ball power, that baseload power, to give the power outage, the wattage required, the amperage required to pump all that power to constantly recharge millions and millions and millions of vehicles at a constant rate. How many vehicles are charged at the same time? If you look at any number now, how many vehicles are charged, are refueled with petrol at 1,000 at any same time across any given place, gives you sort of some idea how much charging you need at any given time if you replace your fuel, your petrol cars or your diesel cars with a rechargeable electric cars. It gives you some idea of the logistics involved, the nightmare that if you haven't got a means to recharge your vehicles, EVs, you've got no means to reduce the real problem, which is pollution, which is CO2 from motorized vehicles. But then there's the problem of constantly having to import more and more fossil fuels so your import costs are going up at the same time as you're reducing your means to make money. So it's therefore causing poverty. There's already an increase in poverty. 1 in 7 children in Australia are said to be in poverty because of electricity prices have gone up so much in the last 10 years. We've got 1 in 7 children living in poverty directly as a result from that, mostly because of a result from that. Now, they're going to continue with this regime of increasing electricity prices in Australia. Therefore, they're going to increase the amount of poor people or people in poverty in Australia. And the more thing about this, the cynical part on my part, is that they advertise at the beginning of this regime, energy from the sun and energy from wind is free. And the odd part about it is that more and more of this supply, the more expensive the energy gets, and the less available and less power it is. But so you can see the distribution of wealth from the workers and the pensioners and the poor people to this elite rich who are involved with all this impoverishment of society and trying to stop Indians and poor black people from getting ahead in life and relieving the amount. Everyone knows, every doctor must know, the best way out of suffering for children with illnesses, poverty-based illnesses, is basically to try and lift people out of poverty, and certainly to lift women out of poverty. And you can't just do that by, everyone should have a solar panel. Okay, right, but that's not going to do it. And a battery, someone's going to pay for all that. It's much cheaper to have one coal-fired station, which can be quite small. It doesn't have to be very big. It's only a steam generator. All it is a means of generating steam that is then passing. And if the white Australians are saying to black Indians, you can't have that, that's racism. That's white supremacist. There you are on your TV, on your election, white supremacists telling black people in Africa, in India, and probably anywhere else that can dominate and tell black people how to behave and how thou should be. They're telling them you can't have what us superior white people have, because we are superior white people. We know what's best for you black people. And if that's not white supremacists, what on earth is? Something to think about before you vote for any of this at all. Think about it. Think about it very seriously.